Okay, so Elon Musk in the news almost as much as Trump. Personally, I'm tired of hearing about Trump. I was tired about hearing about Trump halfway through his presidency, honestly. Elon Musk, I'm not tired of hearing about him yet. They're trying to make him into a villain like Trump, and it's not panning out. There's a certain je ne sais quoi about Trump and Elon Musk. With Trump, people were just activated starting in 2016 and 2017. At the time, the media had a lot more credibility, and they were just activated. By now, I think the media just doesn't have the credibility to really activate people like they did with Trump. But once activated, it's hard to deactivate people, especially boomers. Uh, People get vested in their opinions, as we know. People also have a hard time questioning some beliefs they've held so strongly because it's hard on their egos. It's hard on their egos to admit that they've been bamboozled at some point. And I'm not saying, everybody should go out and like Trump and worship Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter myself. But with Elon Musk, it just all of this bad press just doesn't stick, and it's because of the energy he exudes. If you go out on the streets and you talk to people, oh, did you hear about what do you think about Elon Musk? Is he white nationalist or supremacist or whatever stupid fucking term they use? And you're not going to get the response from people that you get regarding Trump. They're not going to start foaming at the mouth. Generally, they're going to say, oh, he's weird or he's odd, strange, or crazy or something like that. But they're never going to say the things that they say like they do about Trump. So a lot of that also has to do, as I said a moment ago, that the media just doesn't have the credibility, even among people who still generally believe them. They're going to think twice before it's harder to activate people now. As someone mentioned on one of these tweets earlier, the real reason they hate him is because he's killing the mainstream media business wise, and that's inevitable. But so what happened apparently is, according to this tweet, there was an emergency request from government authorities. Which government authorities? I don't know. Ukrainian, American? I don't know. The obvious intent being to sink most of the Russian fleet at anchor. The obvious intent of the request to activate Starlink all the way to Sevastopol. And then if I had agreed to the request, then SpaceX would be explicitly complicit in a major act of war and conflict escalation. Not good for business, especially if you want to shoot rockets up into space for the Russians or anybody else. Not good for business. SpaceX is a private business. Starlink, which is part of SpaceX, they're private businesses. Unless we want to be like the Third Reich. See, nationalizing businesses is what the Third Reich did. National Socialism. That's what the Soviet Union did. That's what Benito Mussolini did. Nationalizing a private business, first of all, would destroy the business. The reason the government is using Starlink and using SpaceX, the United States government, is because they can't put together anything as efficient as they can't put together. They can't build rockets like Elon Musk. They can't put together a space program like Elon Musk because they're too incompetent. Now I'm wondering why they insist on Ukraine using Starlink. Surely the U.S. government has satellite internet networks comparable or probably exceeding Starlink. Surely they do. So that's interesting. Why not let the Ukrainians use Starlink? Probably because the U.S. government doesn't trust the Ukrainians. So apparently he feels, and apparently a biographer of some sort, biography of Elon Musk by historian and journalist Walter Isaacson. Copies of the book were obtained by the New York Times from a bookstore Friday, so it's already on sale, I guess. Though it's not set to go on sale till Tuesday. Okay. The account was included in an excerpt from the book published Thursday by the Washington Post. Of course, no one wants to pay for your crappy newspaper. Now, then there's this allegation or this claim that Elon Musk prevented World War III or prevented nuclear Armageddon. Obviously, that would work well in the favor of Elon Musk, marketing guru that he is. He's all about promotion. That's a pretty good promotion. I prevented World War III. But did he actually prevent World War III or a nuclear holocaust? Would Russia, first of all, have launched nuclear weapons at Ukraine because of if they had sunk a couple of their more prominent naval vessels in Sevastopol? I would argue probably not. Now, supposedly, he was told by the Russian ambassador to the United States in a conversation that the attack could cause World War III, could cause a nuclear response. Could cause a nuclear response. Highly doubtful. And even if the Russians did respond to the attack with nuclear weapons, that doesn't mean A, that the United States would enter the war, and B, that the United States would respond with nuclear weapons as well. I would submit right now that if Russia used tactical nukes on military targets during this war, the United States would not immediately escalate by firing our missiles at them. Wouldn't happen. People picture the United States as some sort of gallant figure that is going to come in like some cowboy. No, we're not. We would let Russia use tactical nukes. Now, if the Russians started using H bombs on civilian targets, which is never going to happen, that would be a different story. But even then, I'm not sure that the United States would immediately get into it. At that point, self-preservation takes over. So, but I would submit that the United States, there's lots of people in D.C., probably the majority of people in D.C., would love nothing more than for Vladimir Putin to push that red button and fire tactical nuclear weapons and use tactical nukes in Ukraine. He would love nothing more. Because that would set into motion a chain of events that would lead to massive defense contracts for nuclear weapons production. You would see within a week an emergency discretionary spending bill going to the DoD or whoever, Space Force, whoever, to start the contracting for a new round of tactical nuclear weapons production. Tactical nukes aren't cheap. There would be all sorts of research and development grifts started. Half of that money would evaporate into thin air, find its way into the hands of friends of politicians, like all the defense spending does, and then eventually back into the pockets of the politicians through lobbying. The whole defense spending scheme is a big money laundering grift. It's a money washing grift. Americans don't care because they've had it too good for too long. They think that everything's been taken care of up to this point, right? Eventually, the money's going to run out. And then people are going to look back and say, hey, remember that Department of Defense audit in which they couldn't account for $11 trillion? And then the second one they did recently, like $2 or $3 trillion. Oh, yeah, that was bad. Well, it's too late. The money's already gone. But yeah, there's more selfless promotion on the part of Elon Musk. He's good at marketing. I would argue, from what I see, he's not a brilliant engineer. He's an engineer. He's smart, but he's more geared towards marketing, towards promotion. And then there's all this talk about, you got people like David Frum, one of the usual suspects. And he's implying, and there's a lot of this talk going around, that SpaceX needs to be nationalized. You start nationalizing businesses, folks, then you're no longer, then that's private property. If they can nationalize Elon Musk's business, they can nationalize your house or anything. And to do that when we're not even in a state of war, that would set a terrible precedent. But you have the usual suspects going out there saying, oh, then we need to nationalize Starlink and SpaceX. How about the government put together a competent space program? They can't do it. They can't do it because they're too incompetent. Why don't you let Ukraine, I'm sure they are by now, letting Ukraine use their defense networks, their defense satellite networks for communications? I'm sure that the Ukrainian hackers are all over that. In fact, it would probably give access, allowing the Ukrainians to use networks like that would probably make it much easier for Russian intelligence to get access to it. That's my thoughts on this little story. No, he didn't prevent World War III. Yes, he's promoting himself. And no, he's not as unlikable as Trump and probably never will be. And the people that are complaining about him, they sound pathetic generally. So they sound pathetic even more. Ukraine is nearing the end of its ability to be a threat to Russian forces, a major threat. The whole conduct of the war shows you just how bad not only Ukrainian leadership is, but United States leadership. I said in the beginning, and I'll say it again, in December of 2021 or maybe November, I said that whatever happens in this war, because it was, gearing up then, it's going to be a disaster for the United States. Why? Because our leadership is terrible. And a lot of people are making the point now that I've made for a while, that letting civilian leadership, people like Jake Sullivan and Victoria Nuland, get involved in the operational planning of a war is always a disaster. Civilian idiots should never be allowed to get involved in a war. You see, politicians like Jake Sullivan are bullshitters. Bullshit doesn't win you a war, folks. There's a lot more. We can win the information war all we want. It means nothing. At the end of the day, you have to win on the battlefield decisively with good tactics and strategy and good leadership. And it doesn't matter how many overhyped weapons you send to the Ukrainians. It doesn't matter. You can send them the entire fleet of F-35s and pilots, let's say. Let's say that you could try. If tomorrow the Ukrainians got the entire F-35 or whatever fleet, they would still faceplant. Because not only is their leadership terrible, but United States leadership is terrible. And this should be a wake-up call to Americans that we have no business getting involved in any war right now. Not because it's right or wrong, It's because if we get involved in any war with a major power like China, Russia, or anyone else that's a major power, we would lose because we have really crappy leadership. Not only do we have civilian leadership, clueless civilian leadership that wants to play war. You got really crappy general staff in the military. They're all yes men. You got nobody like Patton, nobody like Eisenhower. So yeah, so this war is a complete disaster, probably the biggest disaster in American foreign policy since Vietnam. Because in that, just the proof is in the pudding. Just look at the consequences. You have BRICS expanding. You have Africa rejecting Anglo-European American influence. You have the world, large portions of the world, moving away from the dollar. Worse than Vietnam by a long shot. The repercussions of this war will reverberate for a generation or more. Europe will never be able, especially Germany. Germany will, unless Germany leaves NATO entirely, which will be an uphill, up the mountain battle for Germany. Unless they do that, they will never go back to having good relations with Russia. Germany is done. That's my home country. That's my country of origin. And I'm saying right here that Germany is done as a major power in the world. That's it. They're never going to get access to as much energy for as low a price to power their industry ever again. It's over. I would say Britain is done, but Britain has been done for a while. The only thing they're good at is being weaselly little bitches. And liars. The only thing they got is, intelligence. And the United States will putter along, I think, economically. The United States will putter along in relative stagnation. Obviously, the economy is a lot worse now than the GDP numbers would indicate. But yeah, this is a complete disaster. And Elon Musk is smart. He's like, well, I better branch out. I don't want to piss off the Russians. I might want to do business with them someday. I want to do business with the Chinese. I'm not going to become an antagonist in this war. So unless they nationalize my shit, okay, I'm not going to be an antagonist in this war. Because obviously the United States and Ukraine and thus the United States are losing. And losing badly. And you don't want to be on the loser's side. So that's where I'm at with it. I am out.